Part 79. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 783. It wasn't until Chi Heiran and the people disappeared from sight that Luo Zhan looked back and straightened his back. His personal guard looked at him worriedly. Except for the chieftain and priest, the second son had never bent down to anyone. Luo Zhan went back to the table and sat down, and asked, "Do you think King Rong would believe what I said just now?" The guard thought it over and said, "Jun Rong is a smart man, he only listens to what our family says. I'm afraid he won't believe it, but what the second young master said is the truth, so I'm not afraid to investigate." The Xixia people did often invade them, and Luo Dian was indeed divided into two factions. One group advocated to ask the imperial court to garrison troops, and the other group wanted to build a guard army by itself. As long as King Rong was willing to send people to Luo Dian, he would be able to find out. Luo Zhan shook his head and smiled lightly. "I'm talking about the rice seeds. Do you think he will believe that the rice seeds came from us?" The guard was confused. Luo Zhan sighed and said, "This is the greatest sincerity we have shown. If they don't believe it, how can we impress them? Just now, he only asked for 1,000 hu of rice seeds. How much land can 1,000 hu of rice plant? Apparently he doesn't believe us yet." The guard lowered his voice and said, "Are you really going to take out the county's iron and silver?" Luo Zhan hesitated, and said, "Don't say that again. Why did the chieftain and others firmly oppose asking the court to garrison for help? Isn't it because they are afraid that the court will find the silver and iron mines in the county and take them away? The people in the county are in poverty, how can the chieftain and the elders of the clan support them? Isn't it those silver iron? After all, this is the only valuable thing they can get. Because the yield of this kind of rice seed is good, Luo Zhan is full of confidence before coming here, but no matter how good the rice seed is, if the other party doesn't pay attention to it, then it won't matter condition. Luo Zhan actually has other options. After all, Chi Heiran doesn't pay much attention to this kind of grain, and others know the goods. After seeing Chi Heiran himself, Luo Zhan has doubts about the feasibility of the second option. At this time, Su Ji was following closely behind Chi Heiran, and said, "My lord, why do you only need 1,000 hu of rice seeds? That's only enough to plant about 10,000 mu of rice fields. Not to mention other places, Guangzhou prefecture is not enough." Chi Heiran snorted and said, "How many rice seeds can the little Luo Dian produce? And didn't you say that you haven't confirmed whether this rice seed is stable? Do you dare to use it to sow seeds for the people? If you fail to harvest it, you will support the people." Su Ji didn't dare to speak for a while. Chi Heiran said, "Give the rice seeds to Wang Hao, someone under her will do these experiments, and after confirming that the rice seeds can be planted, they will be promoted. Now there are corn and upland rice number 1. As long as you are diligent enough and there are no corrupt officials, the people will not starve to death." "Yes, it's because the lower officials didn't think carefully," Su Ji asked curiously when he saw the prince's expression was flat. "Then prince, do you want to promise Luo Zhan to send troops into the Luo palace?" Chi Heiran glanced at him, and said, "Luo Dian is my land in Daki, do you need to agree to him? If the court gives way to the faction, Luo Dian can't stop it. If the court doesn't give way to the faction, Luo Dian naturally can't ask for it." Su Ji stood there in a daze and watched Chi Heiran walk away. When Chi Heiran returned, he handed his son to Mu Yangling, and turned to find Mr. Qian to discuss. It was a very dangerous thing for Daki that Xixia people could enter through Luodian, but he hadn't noticed this before. Mr. Qian looked at the map for a while, and said, "My lord, there is only one small road from Xixia to Luodian. You also said that Luo Zhan said that the small road can only pass 2 people in parallel. Food, grass, and luggage can't go there at all. From Luodian, there is only a small mountain road, and the mountain road is rugged, it is difficult for Xixia to attack on a large scale from there. But this is a loophole after all, Chi Heiran said. If the opponent sneaks into Luodian like ants, moving troops first, hides in the forests on both sides, and then takes down Luodian in one fell swoop, and uses Luodian as a supply to attack Lingnan, what do you think what are the chances of discovering the military situation? Mr. Qian pondered. Chi Heiran said, you also said that there is only one mountain road from Luodian, and there are no villages and towns along the way. They only need to hide in the mountains and forests, and our scouts are mainly distributed in the Wumeng area, so they don't pay attention to this side at all. Once they're done garrisoning. Thinking of that scene, Mr. Qian couldn't help but shudder, and said, we will set up a garrison in Luodian. Chi Heiran nodded, that's right, I would rather spend more than leave such a big gap for Xixia. He took a pen and drew a point on the map, saying, since we have already set up a garrison in Luodian, it is better to do more to be more perfect. I want to set up a post station here as a channel for the rapid transmission of secret reports. Only urgent military reports of 600 miles can go here. Mr. Qian looked at the dot on the map in astonishment. My lord, isn't this in the deep mountains and old forests? Chi Heiran nodded, but Luodian passed by it when he came out, and Wumeng also passed by here when he went to the capital. We just need to move the point a little bit inward to avoid the sight of ordinary people. Mr. Qian pondered, in this way, the urgent military situation of more than 600 miles in the entire northwest region will pass through here, and the speed will be much faster in the case of special personnel. As long as it works properly, even if the northwest is far away from the capital, it will always be under the control of the capital. It's just that in this way, I'm afraid the cost will not be small. Chi Heiran also supported his head with a headache. Yes, money is always a problem. Chi Heiran sighed, and said, I mentioned this in advance, and it doesn't have to be done now. First, the matter of Luodian's garrison is settled, and if the military situation is to be unimpeded, the road to Luodian must be repaired. Mr. Qian couldn't help but said, road construction also requires money. Chi Heiran glared at him and said, I know that I want money, this master is here to figure out a way. You hurry up and draw up the brochure, sort out what we just said, and it will be distributed to the capital tomorrow. Mr. Qian breathed a sigh of relief when he heard the words. He was really afraid that Chi Heiran would entrust him with getting money. The next day, Mr. Qian handed the booklet to Chi Heiran. Chi Heiran turned around and was about to hand it over to the guard. Mr. Qian widened his eyes and said, My lord, this booklet. It was only then that Chi Heiran realized that he hadn't copied it yet, coughed lightly, and said, Okay, let someone go to the barracks to inform you that today's military training will continue as usual, so I'll go and copy it. Mr. Qian wrote the general notes for him, and he copied them and handed them in. Didn't he think about money today and forget? Fortunately, he didn't hand it in, otherwise the eldest brother couldn't hide it even if he wanted to help him. The paper had to be screened by the courtiers first. Those people had sharp eyes, so they could tell whether his handwriting could be seen at a glance. Chi Heiran took a pen and copied it, read it through after finishing it, and handed it out after making sure there was no problem. Just as Chi Heiran was about to go out to the military camp, he ran into Luo Zhan, who was visiting at the door. Chi Heiran couldn't help raising his eyebrows, but Luo Zhan knew his whereabouts clearly, and even knew that he didn't go to the military camp today. Luo Zhan wasn't in a hurry, but couldn't help but wanted to inquire about the news. Chi Heiran didn't give him an answer yesterday, whether he was willing to send troops there or not. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 784. The establishment of a new guard is a major event. Even if the guard is small, it still needs to be approved by the emperor and the court. With Chi Heiran's power, although he can call the shots and send troops there, he doesn't want to make people suspicious about this matter, let alone, he also wanted to be cold to Luo Zhan. He always felt that Luo Zhan had many things to hide from him. So Qi Heiran told him, I have reported this matter to the imperial court. Once the emperor makes a decision, I will know it here. If Luo Dian builds a guard at that time, then the garrison will naturally come from me. Second Master Luo might as well go back and wait quietly. Luo Zhan quickly asked, then the military system of the garrison is based on the old system or the new system? Naturally, it is a new system that is implemented in the territory of Daki. Ki Luo Palace is mostly high mountains and there are few fields. I'm afraid there is no military field for the garrison. This is also one of the main purposes of his coming to Jeshu in person. He hopes that the imperial court will be more tolerant and share those military fields for them. There is really no flat land in Luo Dian, not even wasteland, and all the places where people and animals can stand firmly have been planted. This is only enough for ordinary people not to starve to death. According to the military system established by the imperial court, there is no military household. With so many military fields, I don't know how many fields will be occupied, and how many clansmen will lose their land because of this. Qi Heiran understood what he meant, but he could immediately agree with him on this point, saying, if the emperor agrees to build a guard, then their families will be arranged on the Lingnan side, and the military fields will also be divided here, but other counties and towns have shared the pressure for you, but you have to pay a corresponding price, otherwise the officials and people in those counties and towns will complain. Luo Zhan asked nervously, I don't know what the prince is referring to. At that time, I will call Zhifalu, Zhihusu and others to talk to you. Qi Heiran was about to bring tea to see off the guests, when Guyu passed by the door. Qi Heiran paused while holding the tea, continued to put it down, and after a while, Xiaoting came in, and whispered in Qi Heiran's ear, my lord, my concubine wants to see the second Master Luo. Qi Heiran raised his eyebrows. Xiaoting stepped back respectfully. Just when Luo Zhan was deliberating whether he should leave, Qi Heiran said, did second Master Luo go to Lingnan before? Luo Zhan shivered, and said with a smile, the road to Luodian mountain is difficult, so our Luo clan seldom come out. This is also the first time I have come to Lingnan, and I have enjoyed a lot of scenery along the way. He was lying. Qi Heiran smiled slightly, and said, that's just right. Xiao Wang's yard was only repaired this year, because the craftsmen from the south of the Yangtze River were used, so the pavilions, towers and pavilions are quite different. Mr. Luo, is there any interest in going to see it? Look. Luo can't ask for more. The two went to the garden together, and Mu Yangling took the little bear directly to sit in the pavilion, with hot water burning on the stove at the side, and when the two entered the garden, a girl came to meet her and said with a smile, my lord, the weather cold, the princess invited you and the guests to drink tea in the pavilion. The pavilion is built on the west side of the garden. Bamboo curtains are put down on the north, south and south sides to block the wind. Only the east side is open to see the scenery outside. I'm afraid it will be more pleasant to cook mutton in a pot. Luo Zhan followed Qi Heiran into the pavilion, raised his eyes slightly to look at Rongjun Princess. Mu Yangling stood up generously, and said with a smile, this is Luo Dian's guest, please sit down. Luo Zhan hurriedly bowed to her, looked at Qi Heiran, but Qi Heiran was already sitting next to Mu Yangling with his robes lifted, and said to Luo Zhan, second Master Luo, please sit down. I heard that you like drinking tea very much. Coincidentally, Xiao Wang also has tea. Why don't you taste the tea brought by Jiangnan? Then Luo is lucky he sat opposite to Qi Heiran, but he felt a little uneasy. He didn't know why he brought him here. He didn't believe that Qi Heiran would entertain him specially. Today, Qi Heiran treats him with an honest look, and he has indeed offended him because of his private contact with Xiao Shizi. The most important thing is, why did Princess Rongjun and Xiao Shizi appear here? The little bear was sitting next to his mother and eating chestnuts. When he saw his father coming, he immediately grabbed the little basket and moved it to his father's side. He put the little basket on the table, took a chestnut and put it in Chi-Heiren's hand. Chi-Heiren went to look at his paws, meaning, "You have hands and strength, how dare you command your father?" The little bear squeezed a chestnut, and the flesh inside shattered instantly. He took off the shell, stuffed the flesh into his mouth, and looked at his father with bulging cheeks. "I accidentally crushed all the chestnuts, which is not delicious at all." Chi-Heiren looked at the chestnut thoughtfully, but there were outsiders around, so he didn't say anything, just took the chestnut from his son and peeled it for him. While drinking tea, Luo Zhan paid attention to the movement of the father and son opposite him. Even though he had seen King Rong's doting on his son yesterday, he couldn't help but sigh at this moment. Compared with Heiren, it is still far behind. "Second Master Luo, I don't know if the string of rice seeds you brought has a name." Luo Zhan was still thinking about Chi-Heiren and Xiao Xiang, when he heard someone asking him suddenly. His heart skipped a beat. He put down his teacup and turned to look at the princess. Seeing her smiling and looking up at him, Luo Zhanxi laughed, returning to Wang Fei. "The rice seed has not been given a name. If this rice seed can be promoted in the Central Plains, it would be better to ask the emperor to give it a name." Mu Yangling nodded slightly, stared at him closely and asked, "Then what do you think it's called?" "Zhancheng rice." Luo Zhan's hand holding the teacup trembled slightly, and his face changed slightly, but he quickly reacted and said with a smile, "This name is really unique." Mu Yangling smiled and said, "I also think this name is very unique." Chi-Heiren on the side narrowed his eyes, and after sending Luo Zhan away, he immediately went back to the pavilion to find Mu Yangling, and asked, "Isn't Zhancheng a city in Annan? Could it be that the rice seeds came from Annan? It was just a guess before, but now I can be sure." Although Luo Zhan's expression changed slightly, neither Mu Yangling nor Chi-Heiren was a fool. At that time, he paid attention to his expression. How could he not see that he was pretending to be calm? "Annan," Chi-Heiren took his son aside, sat on the chair by himself, smiled, and said, "It seems that Luo Dian not only has contacts with Zixia, but also has contacts with Annan." Mu Yangling nodded. "Since the rice seed came from Annan, we need to confirm its stability. Once the rice seed arrives, I will divide it into 4 parts, and give some to Baidi, Northwest, Jiangnan and Lingnan respectively. Plant them together on a large scale, plant them for 2 years to see the situation, and then promote them if the rice seeds are stable." Mu Yangling smiled, "And this rice seed should be early rice. I want to try to see what happens when it is hybridized with upland rice number 1, to see if we can increase the output further. Tell me as many rice seeds as you want, and I'll go ask Luo Dian to ask for it. They have concealed a big thing from us." Mu Yangling stopped him and said, "It's better not to mention this matter, everyone knows it well. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 785. When Luo Zhan returned, he handed over all the guards to him, staring at them with deep eyes. Luo Dian was not far from Zhezhou, but the road was difficult. Even the most familiar cavalry would have to go back and forth for 5 days. They would definitely not be able to go. Luo Dian inquired about the rice seeds. What's more, Compa rice is indeed planted in a small area in Luodian, and it has not been expanded. Asking ordinary people will definitely not get an answer. I can't find out either. And he has only been in Zhezhou for 4 days, and the rice seeds were handed over to King Rongjun just the day before yesterday. How could Princess Rongjun know that the rice seeds flowed in from Zhancheng, Annan country? This matter can only be obtained from the people around him. Someone betrayed him. Seeing Luo Zhan's ugly face, the personal guard leaned over and said in a low voice, "Second young master, maybe it's just a coincidence. Luo Zhan glared at him, "Do you believe this? Ordinary people, who would use the word Kampa to name rice seeds?" She clearly knew that the rice seeds came from Kampa in the Annan kingdom. The personal guard guessed, perhaps there is someone in Rongjun Prince's mansion who recognizes this kind of rice. Didn't it mean that Daki only accepted Dali, and the eldest princess of Dali lived in the general's mansion for a while? And Nangguo and Dali have a personal relationship so close, it's not surprising that they know about it. Luo Zhan frowned and remained silent. The guard close to him whispered, "Second young master, since the Rongjun Prince's mansion has already guessed that this grain is not from our Luo Dian, then the matter of the garrison." Luo Dian gritted his teeth and said, "Wait. We'll go back when we hear the news." If he went back before seeing Qi Heiran yesterday, although he offended the Rongjun Palace, there was still a way to remedy it. He was fined by his father when he went back, but now he has leaked all their cards, and it would be better if he ran back again. To cause trouble for the tribe, it is better to get the exact information before deciding whether to go back. If Rongjun Palace wants to blame them for the crime of deception, he will bear it all by himself at that time, saying that he is greedy for merit and reckless, and he can pick out his father and his clansmen. Luo Zhan gritted his teeth secretly. He could only blame him for underestimating King Rong too much at first. He has been to Western Xia, Dali, and Annan, and he thinks he has seen a lot of the world, and Qi Heiran was only the son of a fourth-rank official before, and he is not much better than him. The bodyguard sighed in his heart. The second young master has always had the problem of underestimating the enemy, and they have persuaded him, but because of Luo Dian's autonomy, the second young master is very powerful and smart in Luo Dian County, so he has not suffered any setbacks, so he heard it, the left ear goes in and the right ear goes out. It's good to suffer this time, so as not to suffer a big loss next time. Although King Rong was honest with his second son, he would not deal with him. This kind of lesson is obviously much lighter than the consequences of causing a big disaster in the future. Luo Dian made up his mind to wait for a result, and then he had the cheek to come to ask every other day. Qi Heiran saw that Luo Zhan, who was still a little impetuous and conceited, became humble, so he smiled and said to Mu Yangling, "I didn't expect that I would help the patriarch of the Luo family to teach his son once." He looked at his son, who was sitting cross-legged on the Kong and playing with building blocks, and said, "In the future, we have to teach our son, no matter how proud we are or how weak our opponents are, we should never underestimate them." Mu Yangling also looked at Little Bear and nodded. Qi Heiran stroked her slightly protruding belly and said, "The thing in the belly has to be taught well, and when the time comes, let Xiaoxiang take his younger brother to learn together." Mu Yangling patted his hand off, and said, "How do you know this is a son? What if it's a girl? Now Xiaoxiang is calling out every day as a younger brother, and if he is born as a younger sister, I see how you can compensate him." Qi Heiran said confidently, "My lord said that this is a son and that is a son." "How do you know? Grandpa's seed, can you still not know?" Mu Yangling's feet were itchy, and he really wanted to kick him off the Kong. Qi Heiran smiled cheerfully, grabbed Mu Yangling's foot and asked, "I forgot to ask you, how did you think of defrauding Luo Zhan?" Can Mu Yangling tell him that it was a guess that he had been thinking about for 2 nights? The development of history is traceable. Without the Great Song Dynasty, there was a Great Zhou Dynasty, and the historical process of the Great Zhou Dynasty and the Great Song Dynasty was similar, but it is undeniable that the speed of the Great Zhou's demise was faster than that of the Great Song Dynasty. Commercial activities are more prosperous than the Song Dynasty recorded in history. Mu Yangling rummaged through the history books and topography, and tried his best to recall the history he had learned in his previous life. The only high-yield rice that appeared at this time was Kampa rice. Unfortunately, Luo Dian could receive Xixia and in southern country. She remembered that in the previous life, Kampa rice was brought to Fujian by sea in the northern Song Dynasty, and then spread to the south of the Yangtze River. According to the time calculation, The current time point is in the southern Song dynasty, but there is no news about Compa Rice in Fujian. History can turn a big corner in the later Tang dynasty and turn the Great Song dynasty into the Great Zhou dynasty. What is impossible is to change the transmission route of Compa Rice from water to land. If it is said that Mu Yangling had only guessed vaguely at the time and was not sure, then she cheated at the time, and the strange color on Luo Zhan's face confirmed this guess. But how to tell Qi Heiran about this? You can't tell the truth, you can't lie to her. Mu Yangling can only look at him directly and say, this is a comprehensive guess based on history books and local annals. Qi Heiran looked at her cheerfully, knowing that his wife had concealed the key points, but he didn't break the casserole to ask the end, but boasted, it's not a loss that she is the princess of the Lord, she is smart. Mu Yangling burst out laughing, his eyes were slightly moist. Qi Heiran is always like this, when you feel that life is as plain as water, stable and happy, he can drop a piece of honey and stir up a lake of water, making people feel sweet. Mu Yangling tilted his head slightly, leaned his head on his shoulder, and said with a smile, when we grow old, if you still treat me like this, I will tell you a story, a long, long story. This time Qi Heiran didn't jump up because Mu Yangling questioned their future, but just embraced her with both hands and responded softly. Aling had something in his heart, he had noticed it when he was a teenager, but he didn't ask it before, he didn't ask it now, and in the future, if she didn't tell her, he wouldn't ask it either. The little bear built the building blocks into a house, clapped his hands happily, and was about to show off to his parents, when he turned around and saw them hugging each other. The father put his hand on the mother's belly to greet his younger brother. The little bear was instantly jealous and shouted, "My brother is mine." He quickly crawled over, grabbed his father's hand and took it away, squeezed into his mother's arms, laying his whole head on his mother's stomach, raised his head for a long time and said seriously to his father, "Daddy, you squeezed my brother, really it's too annoying, you are not allowed to touch my brother in the future, you know? You see that my brother is so angry now that he doesn't say hello to me." Qi Heiran muttered in a low voice, "You brat." Mu Yangling stared at the father and son and laughed, letting them fight together. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 786. Qi Ziyuan agreed to Qi Heiran's application, not only the application for garrisoning troops in Luodian, but also the construction of a military information station, because troops were to be sent from Qianan, and Luodian's garrison was directly subordinate to Qianan. Luodian was remote and barren, and everyone didn't really want to go there. Qi Heiran was also worried that the garrison would grow bigger in Luodian and delay training, so he called Lu Dehe and others to discuss it, and decided that ordinary soldiers should be rotated every 3 years, while Qianan and Luodian is considered to be facing the border, and the training is tight, and there is no big difference between ordinary soldiers. The military fields of the military households remained unchanged, and were still distributed as before. In this way, the soldiers' grievances were much reduced, and Luodian did not have to worry about not being able to afford the soldiers' food and pay. But Luodian also needs to pay some price, because according to the system, the military land of the garrison is divided locally. Now the soldiers don't occupy the share in Luodian, so they have to divide the land in Qianan. Qianan is not much better than Luodian, and there are few fields. The local yamen must have an opinion. As for the price, Qi Heiran waved Lu Qing to talk to Luo Zhan. What Luodian can get away with is rice seeds, except for the indescribable silver and iron. Lu Qing also knows that Luodian doesn't have many good things, and he can't get any food. So Lu Qing asked for rice seeds. He demanded that when Zhu and Luodian asked for grain seeds, Luodian would have to pay in one lump sum that Zhu could sow 10,000 hu of benign grain seeds. After that, the military fields of Luodian's garrison had always been from Zhu. Luo Zhan heaved a sigh of relief, this condition was within his acceptable range, and he hastily complied. Qi Heiran is also fast, and Luoyang is a small place, so there is no need to send generals and lieutenants to station there. He only sent 1,000 households to take him there. As for the construction of the guard, the materials and money are provided by the army, but the manpower needs to be in Luoyang's local area. Take charge. Luoyang didn't expect Qi Heiran to move so quickly, and the garrison could be dispatched immediately. He was both happy and worried at the same time. He was happy because he was not afraid of Zhu's prevarication. Discussed with my father and several elders, but never made it public, especially the chieftain and priests. They didn't know that he was here to invite the imperial court to send troops. Qi Heiran did not allow Luoyang to refuse. The army was ready to go, and sent a batch of supplies to Luoyang the next day. Luoyang had no choice but to keep up. There are also 10 scouts that Qi Heiran specially inserted in. They will go to Xixia and Annan through Luoyang to draw the border line. It would be better if they can get their border defense situation, but they can't. They can also know how many guards are opposite them, so that they can know what they are. After Qi Heiran's ups and downs, it was the New Year's Eve, and he remembered that it was the New Year's Eve, and hurriedly drove home. Before reaching the door, he saw the commotion in front of him. His ears were sharp. Although he couldn't see the figure clearly, he heard his son's shout of joy. He sped up the horse and was startled when he saw the things piled up in front of the house. In the immediate, there are small and large panniers all over the place, and you can tell by the color that they are newly woven. His son is happily standing among a pile of panniers to choose from. Because he is short, if he hadn't been yelling excitedly, Qi Heiran's eyesight is also good enough, otherwise he really wouldn't be able to spot him. There were a dozen or so men standing beside him, and when they saw Qi Heiran riding a tall horse and leading a group of guards back, they knelt on the ground with a plop, lying on the snow. Qi Heiran frowned, dismounted, and said, "Get up." Seeing them getting up tremblingly, with fear on their faces, they couldn't help wondering, could it be that the master really looks so scary? Seeing his father coming back, the little bear ran over with a small pannier on his back, showing off, "Daddy, look, I have so many panniers, so many." The little bear could not wait to stretch his arms to Qi Heiran's face, and Qi Heiran took off the small pannier on his head, hugged him into his arms, looked at the panniers all over the floor and said worriedly, "What are you going to use for so many panniers, when?" "Grow up," little bear said, waving his hand, "put them together with my clothes." Qi Heiran just looked at him with a sense of embarrassment. Qi Heiran and Mu Yangling became parents for the first time. It was inevitable that they were too excited. They bought things for little bear in private. For example, Qi Heiran bought it for him when he was 1 year old. A farm built his private house for him, which was not included in the palace. Later, some things were added one after another, so that he would build a private house in the future, so that he would not worry about money like him. Mu Yangling is keen on making clothes and shoes for children, but it is inevitable to waste too much and can't wear them, so she makes more. So far, Mu Yangling has given him 4 seasons before the age of 14. Clothes are all ready, even all kinds of shoes and boots are ready. When this kid was rummaging through boxes and cabinets, he thought that everything could be prepared in advance, so he even prepared the back basket for use when he grows up. Qi Heiran had a headache, and said, "These baskets will be broken when you grow up. The key is, what will you do with the basket when you grow up?" Now that he is small, he is interested in carrying prey, so he has to carry his own small backpack when he enters the mountain, but when he grows up, he loses interest in this kind of thing, and the prey will naturally be carried by guards or servants, and they go into the mountain. Why do you have to carry a pannier when hunting? Qi Heiran thought of himself riding on Zhenjun's horse with a big pannier on his back, followed by his son who was also riding on a pony with a pannier on his back. His expression was as if he had been struck by lightning. Zhao Zhener and the others were terrified when they saw the prince's unsightly expression, shivering and shivering. They should have arrived a few days earlier. It is not difficult to weave the basket. The whole village, young and old, worked together, and it took only 2 days. Because the journey is far away and it is what the palace wants, Zhao Zhen'er dare not neglect it. The young adults from the village came to deliver the goods together, but they encountered snow on the road and the mountain road was difficult to walk. They were trapped in the mountain for several days and finally slipped down. It was the New Year's Eve when they were delivered here. I was a little apprehensive, for fear that the palace would blame me. But Xiao Shize was very happy to see them, and picked up the basket at the door, and they were also happy to see them, but the prince seemed to be angry. Qi Heiran was not angry, but he was a little helpless with his son's cognition, and planned to go back and teach him well, but he also noticed the expressions of the villagers next to him, turned his head and said softly, "You have worked hard all the way, go down and rest. We have accepted all these backpacks, and the wages will be settled with Manager Zhu." Zhao Zhen'er hurriedly said in a trembling voice, my lord, the young prince has already paid enough money." "Then, that's okay, the young ones will leave." Qi Heiran frowned and looked at their soaked clothes and shoes with their toes exposed in the snow. "Where do you live?" Zhao Zhen'er answered anxiously, and Qi Heiran frowned even more. "I remember that the road was steep, and the snow fell heavily, so the road can still be walked. We are all used to walking the mountain road, it just takes a little longer than usual to go back." Qi Heiran's eyes slid over their feet again, turned his head and said to Zhu Liang, "It's getting dark, and it's not easy for them to leave, so take them to the guest house to rest, and let them go tomorrow." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 787. Qi Heiran ordered his servants to take these baskets to the yard, picked up his son and walked inside. Mu Yangling was walking in the house with his stomach on his stomach. When he saw Qi Heiran carrying his son in like this, he gave him an angry look, took his son next, and warned him, "You are not allowed to carry your son like this in the future. Why does he feel uncomfortable? Manage." "I want to carry it, I want to carry it," Little Bear shouted, like flying, "Daddy, I still want to carry it." Mu Yangling /U0026 Qi Heiran. Mu Yangling ignored Xiao Xiang directly, and turned to ask Qi Heiran, "Why are you back so early today?" Qi Heiran stared, "Isn't today the New Year's Eve?" "Yes, but the New Year's Eve dinner is at night." "Forget it, it's good to come back, lest I have to ask someone to invite you." Mu Yangling said, "The dinner is arranged in Xiaochun courtyard, where we received everyone's kneeling. After that, I will have dinner there, and then come back to the main courtyard to watch the New Year. It's up to you. I have arranged for the 10 or so villagers who brought the bear baskets to the guest courtyard. You ask someone to lock all the corner doors leading to that side, and no one is allowed to go there." Why did they send it at this time? New Year's Eve is a day for family reunion. The mountain was blocked by heavy snow, and the mountain road was rough. They were blocked. Qi Heiran thought of their soaked clothes and marks on their knees, and knew that they had many falls on the road. Seeing that Aling was arranging to deliver New Year's Eve dishes to the lieutenant soldiers, she didn't bother her and went straight out to make arrangements. "Those people are arranged?" "Yes, they are all arranged in a small guest courtyard on the west side, 3 people to 1 room, just full," Fei Bai said. "The little ones have already informed them not to leave the courtyard, and told the nursing home to pay more attention to that side in the evening." Qi Heiran nodded, and said, "Prepare them a set of winter clothes and trousers, and find them some frostbite medicine." After all, they brought something for his son, and Qi Heiran didn't want them to have any accidents. As soon as Fei rolled his eyes, he understood the prince's attitude, and he was more pleasant to the dozen or so villagers. Zhao Zhen'er and the others were both pleasantly surprised and terrified. The things they had promised to deliver in 3 days were delayed for so long. Not only that, they also lived in the palace, ate good food that they had never eaten in their life, and gave each of them a set of cotton clothes and trousers. More than a dozen men nestled in a room with their cotton-padded clothes in their arms and were reluctant to change into them. One man whispered, "I've grown up so much, I haven't worn a new cotton-padded coat yet." "Take it back and let the child change it. Once you change it, you should be able to change it into 2 sets for your child." Others also became excited. Little Xiang crept in from the wall, and the guards guarding the side stopped when they saw the people behind Xiao Shizi, and pretended not to see it, then waved their hands and redeployed, to ensure the safety of Xiao Shizi. But Little Bear lay still on the wall because he found that he couldn't get down. Zhu Zi anxiously said from below, "My lord, are you all right?" The little bear responded, and said in a low voice, "Come up quickly," and took me down. The little bear swallowed the last sentence, turned his head carefully, and looked towards the pillar. Zhu Zi rubbed his hands, and with the help of 2 servants, he climbed up the wall. Seeing that the yard was empty, Zhu Zi breathed a sigh of relief, and said, "My lord, let's go down quickly." The little bear looked at him eagerly, and said, "Go down first, and then catch me." Zhu Zi nodded sharply, then looked down. His head suddenly became dizzy. He blinked to get rid of the dizziness in front of his eyes, saw the height clearly, his legs trembled immediately, and said in a low voice, Zi, that's too high, why don't we go back?" Little Xiang pouted, and heard Danner asking below, "Brother Shizi, Brother Zuzi, can I go in?" Zuzi hurriedly said, "Danner, go back quickly, this place is too high, you can't come up." Before finishing speaking, the door rang. Danner stuck his head in from the door, asked with shining eyes. Said, "Can we move on?" After finishing speaking, he tiptoed to the wall and looked up, lowered his voice and said, "Come down quickly, I'll watch the wind for you." Little Bear and Zuzi. "By the way, why is the door not closed?" Zuzi looked at Xiao Xiang, eagerly hoping that he could give an answer. Xiao Xiang blinked and said slowly, "I clearly heard Uncle Fei Bai say that they are not allowed to go out, so shouldn't we close the door? Otherwise, how could he have the idea of taking risks and insist on climbing the wall? It's all because Uncle Fei Bai is so unprofessional. Since they are not allowed to go out, shouldn't they be locked?" Danner sneaked in through the door, while Goiger pushed open the door and walked in swaggeringly, and then the 2 little ones looked up at the 2 people on the wall, hoping that they could come down quickly, otherwise they would disturb the nursing yard and the room. The people here are not good. The wall was too high, the pillars didn't dare to go down, and he didn't dare to let Shiza try to go down, so he started to sweat coldly on his forehead. Little Xiang kept lying down, turned his head to look at the boy outside the wall, and ordered, "Go in and pick us up." The 4 servants who were sent to protect the little bear were very helpless, but they still went in softly according to Xiao Shiza's request, and then reached out to catch him. The 4 servants did not move together, 2 went in first, and the other 2 stayed in place to watch Xiao Shiza, so as not to cause accidents when they entered the yard. Seeing that someone was following from below, Little Bear got a lot more courageous, so he got up and changed to sitting on his stomach, and then carefully turned both of his calves towards the wall. Chi Heiran has been standing on a stone outside watching. His face is indifferent, but his fists are clenched tightly, and his eyes are fixed on that side. He saw the little dot on the wall suddenly jumping down from above, and his heart suddenly jumped. When he mentioned it, he couldn't help but flew up, and stood on the fence at once, looked down, and saw that his son was jumping down from the arms of a servant, excitedly raised his head and shouted at Zuzi, "Brother Zuzi, come down quickly, it's fun." Chi Heiran swayed, and flew to the side of the tree. Because the movement was fast enough, the little bear didn't notice, but the other 4 servants had their backs stiff, their heads slightly lowered, and stood respectfully aside. Zuzi was frightened by the little bear's action just now, and now he still can't recover. He gritted his teeth when he heard the little bear's cry, turned his legs tremblingly, and jumped off the top as soon as he closed his eyes. People caught it until it was put on the ground, and the pillar was still a little weak and unable to stand. But Little Bear was already pulling him and Danner to run to the room excitedly. The 4 children just lay at the window and looked in. Seeing the people inside holding cotton coats and trousers without changing, they were excitedly discussing something. The little bear was very puzzled and asked, "Their clothes are so dirty, why don't they change them?" You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu. Chapter 788. The little bear sat beside his mother with red eyes, stretched out his hand and said, "Mom, where is my red envelope?" Mu Yangling was taken aback, and said, "The red envelopes won't be distributed until tomorrow." Little Bear pouted and said, "Then remember to pack more." Mu Yangling was amazed. Little Xiong never paid much attention to money. When he gave him red envelopes, he always turned around and stuffed them into her arms, asking her to help keep them. He never looked at how much money was in them. This was the first time he asked for more red envelopes. "Number?" Mu Yangling coughed lightly and asked, "Are you short of money now?" Little Bear nodded seriously, and emphasized, very lacking, very lacking." Chi Heiran, who was sitting on the side, glanced up at him, interrupted the mother and son and said, "Xiong, go and bring in the mutton, we'll eat it in the pot tonight." Whether it is Chi Heiran or Mu Yangling, they don't like servants standing in front of them during the New Year's Eve dinner, so they retreated one after another after bringing things in. Except for the guards who were still patrolling every corner of the palace, everyone else go down to eat. With no one around, Chi Heiran ordered his son to work as he should. Little Xiong rolled his eyes and said, "I brought it here, do you want to give me money?" Chi Heiran's eyes widened, he turned his head and said to Mu Yangling, "In just half an afternoon, my son got into the eyes of money. In a few days, I think he will become Zijin's son." "Who said that Zijin's son is going to get into Qian's eye?" Mu Yangling said with a smile, "Be careful that Zijin will beat you if he hears this." Chi Heiran stretched out his hand to pick up the purse, but Mu Yangling patted his hand, turned to the little bear and said, "Son, if you don't eat mutton tonight, I will consider giving you money, and if you want to eat it, you have to pay for it." "How can we be asked to pay for our New Year's Eve dinner because we have to do a little work?" Chi Heiran thought about it, and immediately became puzzled, and looked at his son. Little Xiong tilted his head and thought for a while, before hesitating over the money and the mutton pot. He climbed down the kong. "I'll get the mutton. It's on the table outside, don't take it by mistake." Seeing him go out, Mu Yangling turned to ask Chi Heiran, what stimulated this child this afternoon, and why did he become short of money? Chi Heiran sighed and said, "You will know tomorrow." As soon as the words fell, Little Bear had already rushed in with a small basin, obediently put the basin on the stool beside him, looked at the steaming hot pot on the table, and salivated, "I want to eat, I want to eat." Mu Yangling pursed his lips and smiled, cooked a piece of mutton for him, and said, "This pot was originally reserved for supper at night, and you didn't know where you went in the afternoon, and you felt cold all over. I just touched your hand, it's all cold. This is boiled mutton soup. You and the little bear will drink a little first, and then eat the New Year's Eve dinner. This pot is slowly heating up, we will keep vigil while eating at night." Chi Heiran shrunk his neck, and honestly drank a bowl of mutton soup. Today he stood on the tree for a long time, blowing in the air, motionless, his hands and feet were naturally cold. Little Bear obediently drank half a bowl of soup and ate a few slices of mutton. Then Chi Heiran put the pot aside, lifted the plates on the table, and looked at the New Year's Eve dishes prepared in the kitchen. It is nothing more than chicken, duck, and fish, and the brightest thing is the 3 plates of green vegetables on the table. They were sent by the farmer, and the output of the greenhouse was built. Compared with Jiangnan, the output is much lower, but because it is the first year, Mu Yangling didn't care about the output, as long as it was enough for his family to eat. Chi Heiran is okay, he still prefers meat, and he stopped moving after moving his chopsticks a few times, but Mu Yangling almost wrapped up 3 plates of green vegetables, which made Chi Heiran stare at her, and Mu Yangling directly gave him, and little Xiong picked up a chopstick of vegetables and said, "Nutrition should be balanced, eat more vegetables." Chi Heiran picked up his chopsticks and asked, "Why have you been a vegetarian for the past 2 days, don't wrong my son." "It's what I want to eat in my stomach," Mu Yangling said, "I think it's a daughter." Chi Heiran didn't believe it, but Mu Yanglingzuo testified, "When I was pregnant with the bear, I still liked to eat meat, and he moved very happily, day and night without a moment's rest, but look at this baby, I like to eat vegetables instead. I also like to eat spicy food, the more spicy the better, they say sour and spicy, and this kid is very lazy, he can't move a few times a day, which is the complete opposite of Xiaoxiang's time." The little bear stuffed green vegetables into his mouth in disgust, and asked, "Then can I give my sister my green vegetables to eat when she is born?" "No," Mu Yangling said with a stern face, "I eat my own vegetables. Every child has to eat a certain amount of vegetables every day." Depressed, the little bear stuffed green vegetables into his mouth, muttered while chewing, "Then let's have a younger brother, not a younger sister." Mu Yangling stared at Chi Heiran, and said in a low voice, "In the future, if little bear doesn't get along well with his daughter, it's because of you talking about your son all day long." Chi Heiran straightened his back in an instant, and said to his son righteously, "How can you think of letting your sister eat vegetables for you? You are the elder brother, so it should be you who help the younger sister. You are the elder brother, and you must protect the younger sister in the future, love my sister, not only can't bully her, but also can't let others bully her, this is the responsibility of a brother, you know." Little Xiong stared blankly at his father with the vegetables in his mouth, before nodding for a while. Chi Heiran exhaled, and looked at his wife begging for praise, "Look, my son has taught me well." Mu Yangling grinned, poured all the vegetables left on the plate into his bowl, and said, "This is a reward for you." The little bear looked at his father sympathetically for a moment, but Chi Heiran cheerfully picked up half of it and put it in his son's bowl, and said with a smile, "My son is growing up, and he needs more nourishment. Come, eat more vegetables, it's good for your health." Ignoring the small eyes of his son's accusation, Chi Heiran lowered his head and ate fiercely. Mu Yangling looked at Little Bear, and said softly, "Little Bear, do you still want it? There should be vegetables in the kitchen, mother asked your father to bring them." The little bear shook his head again and again, lowered his head and tried to wipe out the vegetables in the bowl, and Mu Yangling was satisfied. Mu Yangling was pregnant, and Xiao Xiong was young, so he said he was going to watch the night, but it was just after haze hung, around 10 o'clock in the evening, the two fell asleep leaning on Chi Heiran's body. Chi Heiran carefully placed his son on the Kong, and then let his wife lie down, covered the two of them with a quilt, sat on the top of the Kong and watched the candle light, and gently brushed a strand of hair from the corner of a ling's ear to the back of his head, quietly looking at the sleeping mother and son. Chi Heiran saw that the mother and son were both pouting their lips slightly in their sleep, and their expressions were surprisingly the same. He couldn't help but pursed his lips and smiled, saying that the little bear looks like him, but sometimes he thinks that the little bear misses a ling more, especially some expressions, which are different from a ling was exactly the same when he was a child. Chi Heiran looked at the mother and son with tenderness in his eyes. He thought that the remaining hour would be difficult, but in a flash, the bell rang outside. Chi Heiran turned his head to look outside, and saw that the little bear was sleeping soundly. Shen, in the end, was not willing to wake up the people, pressed the quilt for them and went out. Zhu Liang and Fei Bai had already brought all the servants of the house to wait in front, and when they saw Chi Heiran coming out, they hurriedly offered a stick of incense. At the beginning of the new year, he was asked to set off the first firecrackers. Chi-Heiran smiled slightly, and lit the hanging firecrackers. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 789. Little Xiong sat up from the bed as soon as he rolled over. He rubbed his eyes in a daze. When he saw that it was bright outside, his eyes widened immediately. He threw off the quilt, jumped off the Kong and ran outside. Chi-Heiran opened the curtain and came in, and saw his son rushing out in his underwear and trousers with bare feet. He quickly reached out to hug him, thinking that he had just come in from the outside and was covered in cold air, so he changed his hug to a carry, and walked a few steps quickly tucking him under the quilt. He shouted, "Who told you to run outside like this? If you catch a cold, I'll make you drink bitter medicine for a month." The little bear popped out from under the quilt and shouted, red envelope, my red envelope." Chi-Heiran rolled his eyes, took his clothes pickily and awkwardly dressed him, and said, "Put on the clothes first, and you will have the red envelope." Chi-Heiran gave Xiaoxiang a big red envelope, because Xiaoxiang emphasized bigness, so Chi-Heiran temporarily changed the silver bills into gold coins, filled a small purse, and weighed it. It was worth 7 or 8 taels, all of which were gold. But Chi-Heiran would not tell him that he planned to give him 100 taels of silver bills before, but seeing that his son couldn't count, he temporarily replaced it with a golden naked sun. Who knows that the little bear is still not satisfied, clutching his purse and looking at his father accusingly. "Not big enough, it's small." He pinched a golden newt inside to show his father. It was only the size of a thumb, it was too small. Chi-Heiran rolled his eyes, turned around and opened the lattice at the head of the bed, took out 5 ingots of silver, each of which was a standard 10 tael, handed it to his son and asked, "Do you want to change it?" Cub compared the size and weight, and exchanged decisively. Chi-Heiran laughed loudly, and told his son that 1 tael of gold can be exchanged for 10 taels of silver. Little Xiong, who was only 3 years old, was not very sensitive to numbers, and he couldn't figure it out after counting with his fingers for a long time, but he knew his father was laughing at him like this, so he knew that he was taking a loss, so he stuffed the silver back and snatched the gold back. He pouted aggrievedly and went to find his mother. Mu Yangling was preparing breakfast. Chi-Heiran rarely had a 5-day vacation. Naturally, he had to prepare this breakfast carefully. When his son came to her early in the morning with his mouth pouting, he knew he was being bullied by Chi-Heiran again. It's strange to say that when it comes to spoiling children, Chi-Heiran is more than Mu Yangling, and he is usually willing to take his son out for a ride, hunting, and so on. When the father and son are good, they can't wait to stick together. They quarreled every minute, just like 2 children. Little Xiong stood at his mother's feet aggrieved, and complained, "Daddy bullied me." Mu Yangling patted his head and said, "Let's ignore him and help mother make breakfast. We'll go to your Uncle Zaijian's house to see plum blossoms after we finish eating." Little Bear climbed up the chair and said, "Will Uncle give me a red envelope when he comes back?" "No," Mu Yangling said, "Uncle Zaijian came back after the spring festival, and there are no red envelopes." The little bear was very disappointed and asked, "Mother, please give me a bigger red envelope. This year I have too few red envelopes." Mu Yangling laughed and said, "Then do you remember how many red envelopes you received last year?" Dumbfounded, Little Bear asked, "I received red envelopes last year." A child's memory is very short. He was only 2 years old a year ago, how can he remember? He asked excitedly, "What about my red envelope?" "Mother saved it for you," Mu Yangling said with a smile, "I'll get it for you later, but you have to tell mother why you want so many red envelopes." Xiaoxiang wants red envelopes to help others. Yesterday, the 4 children sneaked into the small guest house and saw the people inside holding new cotton clothes but didn't wear them for a long time. They just took off the wet clothes and hung them aside to dry. Cannot help but feel surprised. Xiaoxiang has always adhered to the principle of asking if he doesn't understand, so he rushed in immediately. In the eyes of Zhao Zhen'er and others, Xiaoxizi is a high-ranking official and an unattainable figure. Now if you ask them questions, how dare they hide it, and because I was afraid that Xiaoxizi would blame them for not wearing the clothes they issued, so I explained the reason in detail, and hoped that Xiaoxizi would not blame them. A person may only make new clothes twice in his life. Other clothes are either remade from the old clothes of his parents, brothers, and sisters, or remade by other relatives. You can pick 2 or 3 sets for a penny, which is very cheap. For Little Bear, who has new clothes every season and makes all the clothes after the age of 14, such a life is impossible to imagine. The more questions are asked, the Little Bear naturally knows more about the poverty in the countryside, and Zuzi and Danner understand it more deeply. Why is Danner so obsessed with eating? Because he was so hungry, he had never had a full meal since he was born and came to Chi Palace. Because he was hungry, so he was very obsessed with eating, and he had only been here for half a year, and he had become a little fat man, if not Mu Yangling asked someone to control his diet, for fear that he would get fatter. So Danner told Little Bear, so poor, with nothing to eat, and hungry. Little Bear looked at him pityingly. What Zuzi said was much more specific. He was already 6 years old when he came here. Children in the countryside are precocious in raising a family. Little Xiang felt sympathetic when he heard that, thinking that money can buy food and clothing, he wanted to send him money to them. But Zuzi said that Xiaoxiang didn't have enough money, and there were too many people in the village. Zuzi didn't know how much money Little Bear had, but he didn't think a 3-year-old doll could have much money, so he tried his best to stop it. Xiaoxiang remembered that Brother Xiaobao said that there are red envelopes for Chinese New Year, so he anxiously asked his parents for red envelopes. Mu Yangling heard that his son was so sympathetic, so he wrapped a big red envelope for him, touched his head and said, Little Bear is really good, and he will help others, but if you buy food and clothes for them, then they will. What should I do if my clothes are old and I have nothing to eat? Little Bear tilted his head, buy them again. Then what will you do if the villagers from the first village, the second village and the third village come to them and say that they have nothing to eat and nothing to wear? Little Xiang bit his finger and said, there is no more money. Mu Yangling looked at him with a smile, and Little Bear said pitifully, Mother, can you give me money? Mu Yangling shook his head, my mother is also very poor, she has no money. Then what should I do? Little Bear propped his chin in distress, his eyes lit up for a while, and shouted, I see, I will ask Uncle for it. Uncle is the richest. When Daddy has no money, he will ask Uncle for it. Mu Yangling mourned for Fan Zijin in his heart, and said on his behalf, Uncle Zijin also has no money, and then said, your Uncle Huang also has no money. Little Bear pouted, why are you all so poor? Because we want to support you, all our money has been spent, so naturally it's gone. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 790. Mu Yangling touched his head and said, so if you want to help others, you have to find a way to raise money yourself. Little Xiang sympathized with his poor parents, and then began to count with his fingers how many people he could help with the money in his hand, but now he can only count up to 50, and the subsequent numbers are always confusing, so naturally I don't understand. Mu Yangling watched him sitting on the chair and counting with his fingers. His father didn't respond when he came. Chi Heiran sat at the table, looked at his son curiously, and asked, what's wrong with him? He's thinking about something, don't disturb him. Mu Yangling stuffed a steamed bun into Chi Heiran's mouth, and said, take your son to the farmer's house below after eating, don't notify them in advance, just come back after seeing how people celebrate the new year. Chi Heiran frowned, didn't you say to admire the plum blossoms? What's there to see in the farmer's house? Mu Yangling sighed, your son doesn't know the price of firewood, rice, oil, and salt. I asked him to see how ordinary people live during the Chinese New Year. If I tell you to go, I have something to tell him when I come back. Chi Heiran took his son out slowly, and outside their house was a whole area of farmland, and the households below were all tenants of Chi Mansion and Fan Mansion. When Mu Yangling bought the land at the beginning, he bought the whole area with 2 mountains together. Except for the 2 big houses, the rest of the mountains and fields were divided into 2, which was recorded by Chi Heiran and Fan Zijian. Under the name, the previous tenants have not been dispersed, and they are still in use. But there is not much land, and there are only about 20 tenants in the 2 families. They all live in the original small village, not far from their home. When Mu Yangling played with the bear in the field, those tenants only dare to look at it from a distance, but dare not approach it. So Chi Heiran carrying his son into the village was the first time they had close contact with the owner's house. As if they saw something, the villagers who were sweeping snow at the entrance of the village ran back in panic, felt bad halfway, and stopped, knelt down on the ground and kowtowed to Chi Heiran. Chi Heiran waved his hands indifferently and said, "Get up, my New Year's Eve grandpa is here to see how everyone's life is going." Naturally, Chi Heiran didn't just bring his son, but also 2 mule carts with rice, flour, and some meat on them, which were distributed to the farmers. Chi Heiran put his son on the ground and said, "Go and help with the work." Little Xiang ran towards the mule cart. There were tenants on both sides of this year-end benefit, and the tenants belonging to Fan Zijian knew that the 2 families were not separated from each other, so they went home with a bag of farts. Bump ran to line up. Little Xiang stood on the side to help distribute the things, but in fact he just helped to hold the pockets. Others standing there are not as tall as a bag of grain, so what can they do? The children of the tenants rushed out to watch. Seeing the white flour, white rice, and meat all stared with green eyes, they stood aside and swallowed their saliva. Children are always the most attracted to children. After these children came, Xiaoxiang's eyes shifted instantly, and he didn't stay here anymore. He ran directly in front of the group of children, tilting his head to look at them. Looking at the well-dressed, clean, and fair Xiao Shizi, the children shrank together timidly. Chi Heiran was talking to an elderly person in the village. He caught sight of the movement here and was hesitating whether to help his son, when he saw his son turn around and run back to the mule cart to bring out a cloth bag and head towards the children. Chi Heiran breathed a sigh of relief. It was Mu Yangling's outfit for Little Bear before they left the house, saying it was a diplomatic tool for Little Bear. At first he hated the trouble of bringing those fragile pastries, but now it looks good, at least the son can find the children to play with. Little Bear ran back with the bag, opened it, grabbed a piece of snack and put it in the hand of the youngest child, saying, "Eat, eat quickly." Seeing the snack in the child's hand, other children gathered around at the same time. When a farmer saw it, he wanted to go forward and bring his child back. Chi Heiran glanced at it, and immediately a guard stepped forward to stop it. Little Xiang successfully conquered the children in the village with a bag of pastries. When he saw that their clothes were decorated with cloth of different colors, he touched them curiously. The thin clothes were cold in the cold wind, because their bodies were like other children's clothes. The thinner bear was shocked. "This clothes is thinner than his, can it really keep warm?" Seeing everyone wolfing down the cakes into their mouths, Little Bear became more and more suspicious. The children in the village saw that the little bear was easy to get along with and had a soft mouth to eat people, so they were willing to play with him. After a while, a group of children could talk together and run around the village hand in hand. When the little bear was hugged by his father and wanted to go home, he tried his best to stick out his head and waved at them, shouting, "We will continue playing hide and seek tomorrow." "Not tomorrow, tomorrow you have to accompany Dad to receive guests." Chi Heiran patted his buttocks. The little bear lay on his father's shoulder, and immediately changed his tune and shouted, "Tomorrow I will receive the red envelope, and we will play together later." This time Chi Heiran didn't stop him, Little Seong excitedly ran back to find his mother, and shouted, "Mother, where are the uncles in the small guest house? I want to share their money." They went back, Mu Yangling counted with his fingers, mother gave them their wages, clothes to keep out the cold, and some food and noodles. These mothers have calculated the money. You can give it to me later, just do it. Little Seong opened his mouth wide, covered his purse and asked, "Mother is the best." "Well, so mother will give you a 20% discount." Mu Yangling nodded in satisfaction, took over his words and said, "It's because little bear wants to help others, so mother gave them these things, and those are all from us food. If we don't use the money to buy something to make up for it, then we will have nothing to eat." Little Seong didn't expect his family to be so poor, so he could only take out his purse and pour out a handful of gold and silver nudes, but Mu Yangling showed him the account, saying, "The clothes and rice noodles cost 3, 2 or 6 renminbi in total, and my mother doesn't care about it. I want more of you, Li Shun, go get the scissors." Mu Yangling picked out 3 silver nudes of 1 tael, and cut 6 taels of silver with scissors, before returning the rest to Little Bear. Little Bear tilted his head, "This doesn't seem like a lot of money." Mu Yangling took the abacus and asked, "You have been to Zhuangzi today, how do you think they are doing?" Little Seong sniffled and said, "They are so poor. Big Heza said he only ate 2 pieces of meat a year. So you want to help them?" Little Bear nodded fiercely, looking at his mother with shining eyes. Mu Yangling asked him how he wanted to help them. In Zioxiang's view, helping them is to give them food and clothing, which is simple and rough, and Mu Yangling will give him the money he said he would spend. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 791. Little Seong was dumbfounded by counting his own money, and Mu Yangling guided him, teaching people how to fish is worse than giving them fish. You feed them, it's better to teach them to feed themselves. Little Bear tilted his head, "What fish?" Mu Yangling smiled and explained the meaning of the sentence to him, and Xiao Xiong propped his chin and said in distress, "But I don't know how to teach." If you don't know how to teach, you can ask your teacher to teach them. Education can change their minds and allow them to learn skills and survival skills. So, Little Bear, help them build a school. The bear's eyes sparkled. Chi Heiran stood at the door with his mouth wide open to watch his wife cheating on his son, and when he was sleeping at night, he asked, "Isn't this similar to a nursery?" Mu Yangling gave a hum and said, "But it's still a little different. This is just a small school in Zhuangzi. It depends on how long he can last." Mu Yangling just wanted to use this to cultivate his son's character and exercise his ability. If a person does good deeds from an early age, he won't become a bad person when he grows up. Chi Heiran hesitated for a while, but still said in a low voice, "The influence of the nursery school is too great." It was possible to do this in the special circumstances of the Northland back then, but not in other places. Then what if the royal family takes the lead in this matter? Without the Mu family, and without you, how about doing it in the name of Big Brother? Chi Heiran was silent for a while, and said, "No money." "I didn't ask you to open it all over the country now," Mu Yangling murmured, "but take your time, and always find something for your descendants to do, otherwise, like other dynasties, one generation will not be as good as one generation, and it will perish after a few generations." Chi Heiran frowned, and said, "There are so many things going on in one country. Always have a goal, for example, stabilize the refugees in 5 years, take back their homeland in 10 years, live and work in peace and contentment in 15 years, have enough food and clothing in 20 years, provide care for the elderly in 50 years, and rely on children in 50 years. Yes, what is the education rate of the country in 5 years, how much is the grain output? There must always be a goal, You can't just review any papers you receive, and only deal with things when they happen. Now Daki is only established. Although the eldest brother he is busy, but his goal is set there, he has a direction to move forward. Xiaobao can continue the unfinished business of his elder brother, keep it. What about the emperor after Xiaobao? What do they do? Mu Yangling lay in Qi Heiran's arms, and said in a low voice, look at the emperors of all dynasties, what have they done after the third and fourth generations? During their term of office, they will repair water conservancy, and then hold imperial examinations step by step to select and appoint talents. As long as you work diligently to go to court, review memorials, and deal with corrupt officials, you will be a wise king. When you meet someone who is greedy for pleasure, you will use the money accumulated by your ancestors to collect beautiful women, build gardens, and spend money like water flowing into the palace. If our Daki is like this, it will only be a dynasty of 100 or 200 years, the country you have worked so hard to build, and your ambitions. Are you willing to be cut off in the hands of your descendants like this? Qi Heiran's blood was boiling when he heard it, and he couldn't help but exert a little force on the hand holding Mu Yangling. Mu Yangling found a comfortable position in his arms, and said, so we have to find something for them to do, and find some goals for future generations. The ancients, among other things, respected their ancestors very much. Few of the descendants are willing to break the established rules, and if they want to break, there will be a group of passionate ministers working hard to maintain them. If it is outdated, the rules of the ancestors are really painful, but what if it is just a goal for future generations? Everything has disadvantages and advantages. Who said that believing in ancestors is not beneficial? What do you want to build the country? Tell them, let future generations work hard and protect it. Qi Heiran's eyes sparkled, and he said, the soldiers are strong and the horses are strong, there is nothing wrong with insulting and deceiving the country. Mu Yangling nodded slightly, then you can ask the eldest brother what he wants to build the country for. What kind of country does Qi Xiaoyuan want to build? He hoped that the people of Daki will end their old age, be useful when they are strong, and be able to grow when they are young, so that those who are reserved, widowed, lonely, and disabled will all be supported. This is also the dream of most emperors, but so far no one can do it. Holding her brother's letter, Qi Xiaoyuan pondered. Ling's goal was obviously more specific and far-reaching than his. She hoped that she would have a care for her old age, a care for her children, a cure for her illness, and an education for all. How can it be? Qi Heiran also thought it was impossible, but when he wrote the letter, Ling was sitting beside him watching, so he could only bite the bullet and write down what Ling said. Thinking of the soft expression on her face when she said this, he couldn't bear to break her fantasy. But in fact, at that time, Mu Yangling just remembered her life in her previous life. Although her country hadn't been able to do that in her previous life, it was much better than it is now. Moreover, the government is working hard in that direction, although everyone always scolds everyone. This kind of policy is unfair and imperfect, but it will not be short of food and clothing like it is now. 20 or 30 miles away is like another world. Ordinary people can't travel at all, and dare not travel. After reading the letter, Qi Xiaoyuan put the letter in a box specially placed for family letters, picked up a pen and began to think about what kind of goal he should set for his children and grandchildren. Give up. When Qi Xiaoyuan made the outline and was about to go back to the dormitory, he remembered that he hadn't seen his son all day, so he went to the East Palace as soon as he turned around. Qi Xiaoyuan waved his hand to interrupt the servant who was about to report, and stepped in. His son, who thought he was studying his homework, was sitting cross-legged on the couch, counting the hills of gold and silver in front of him. Qi Xiaoyuan opened his mouth wide, wondering in his heart, his son hasn't been crowded with Zijin recently, why is he falling in love with money? Qi Xiaoyuan paced forward, while Xiaobao was concentrating on counting the money. Like cubs, he also has a lot of savings. It should be said that he has more money than Cubs. Because he lives in the capital, he can receive a lot of red envelopes during the Chinese New Year when he goes out for a walk, and the prince's salary is also quite a lot, and now that he is young and the only prince in the palace, he doesn't have to think about rewarding the maids and servants with money. To win contacts or something, as long as you eat and drink, you can only get in and out, and after a few years, don't save too much money. The most important thing is that all his money is taken by himself. No, his wet nurse used to hold the key, but now it's in his hands, and he can use it whenever he wants, unlike Little Bear, who has all the money with his aunt, and if he wants to spend money, he has to reach out and ask his aunt for it. So pitiful. Xiao Bao sympathized with Xiao Xiang in his heart, while trying to count the money, completely unaware that his father was standing behind him and watching him. After Xiao Bao calculated the money, he recorded it, planning to write a letter to tell brother Xiao Xiang that his money was 4 times more than his. Seeing little Bao happy, Qi Xiu couldn't help asking, "Bao, what are you doing?" Xiao Bao was startled, turned his head and saw his father, and said happily, "Father, you are here, and I am counting the money, please help me to see if I have made a mistake." Although Xiao Bao thinks he is smart and can't count wrongly, but he is only 5 years old after all, so he is still a little nervous. Qi Xiaoyuan sat on the edge of the couch, stretched out his hands and asked while counting, "Why did you remember to count the money?" "Brother Xiang borrowed money from me. He is very poor now, and he still owes his aunt a lot of money. The reborn wife is farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 792. Qi Xiaoyuan read his son's letter in astonishment, handed the letter to him after a while, coughed lightly, and said with a reddened face, "You can read it to your father." After standing close, I realized that I couldn't even read the letter. Xiao Bao took the ink-spotted letter, stood up solemnly, read it in a little bear's tone, and finally sighed, "Father, why are uncle and aunt so poor? Let's share some of the family's money with them." In the letter, Xiao Xiang cried out for poverty, telling Xiao Bao that he not only spent all his savings for many years, 3 years, in order to run 3 schools, but also owed her mother 56 taels of silver, so poor that he even had no money to buy candied haws. Xiao Xiang said in the letter that on the day he wrote to Xiao Bao, he hadn't dared to go shopping for 3 days, and he didn't have any money on him. Only then did he know that it doesn't feel good to have no money, so he can only borrow money from Xiao Bao, and when he returns to Beijing, he will pay him back. If he can't pay it back, he will use his set of luxury travel toys to pay off the debt. The set of luxurious toys was a gift from Qi Heiran when the little bear could talk, and it was completed with the assistance of 2 craftsmen from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. There are luxurious carriages, BMW swords, and a statue of a bear-like child sitting on a horse. Little Treasure was greedy for a long time, and Little Bear was only touched by him once. Seeing that he had even taken out that set of toys to pay off the debt, Xiao Bao felt very distressed, so he immediately asked the wet nurse for the key, and took out the box where he kept his silver to count the money. Xiao Bao looked at his father pitifully, as if Qi Xiaoyuan had abused Qi Heiran, which made Qi Xiaoyuan very angry. Even if the younger brother is poor, it is impossible to be so poor that he can't spend 180 taels. It's just running 3 primary schools, so he needs to pick up the children's money. Qi Xiaoyuan took Xiaoxiang's letter and read it again and again, and almost made 2 holes in it, but he could barely make out a few words, the word of Xiao Xiang. Qi Xiaoyuan looked at his son and felt that he was really smart, and he was able to read so much content in a pile of ink dots. Qi Xiaoyuan gave up and returned the letter to him, saying, "You don't need your money anymore, my father will allocate money to your uncle." Xiao Bao blinked, and said, "But I have already agreed to lend money to brother Xiao Xiang. What my father gave to my uncle is not what I gave to brother Xiao Xiang. It's different. You can't just keep your promises. You sent the letter? Isn't the money still here?" The letters between the sun and the little bear are all in his hands. Every time, he hitches a ride on the letter he wrote to his brother. When did he send the letter alone? Little Treasure said seriously, I promise brother Little Bear in my heart. Chi Xiaoyuan rubbed his forehead and said, okay then, how much do you want to borrow? Father will give you the banknote directly. Xiao Bao frowned, and said in disapproval, Father, I want to lend my own money to brother Xiao Xiang, so I don't want your money. How can you always spoil me? Chi Xiaoyuan. Chi Xiaoyuan went back clutching his chest, walked to the door of his bedroom, turned around and went to Cunning Palace. After thinking about it, he felt that it was necessary for him to have a good talk with the queen about his son's education. Eunuch Wan, who was following behind Chi Xiaoyuan, followed the emperor helplessly. The queen is also reading the letter Mu Yangling sent her. Every time Qianan sends her a letter like this, Qi Heiran writes to Chi Xiaoyuan, Xiao Bao will receive the letter and things from Xiao Xiang, and the queen will receive the letter from Mu Yangling, unless it is important official correspondence, otherwise I always receive letters twice a month. It's hard for the husband to talk about it, but the two sisters-in-law talked more about their children, their education, their basic necessities of life, and all kinds of small news about childbirth, and even their own dowry management. At this time, the queen looked at Mu Yangling's letter repeatedly and thought about it. Seeing that the emperor was coming, she hurriedly helped her stomach to get up. Her days were not far from Mu Yangling's. Her stomach was slightly protruding at this time, but it was different from Mu Yangling's pregnancy reaction of lethargy. She vomited almost every day, and until now she couldn't smell a bit of greasy smell. So she was very nervous about this baby. Chi Xiaoyuan didn't dare to ask her to salute, so he took 2 quick steps to support him, and sat on the couch together. It's getting late, why haven't you rested yet? The queen smiled and said, I slept too much in the afternoon, so it's not easy to go to bed early at night. Seeing that the emperor didn't even change into his regular clothes, she felt distressed and said, the emperor just came out of the imperial study. No, I just came from the emperor's place. Chi Xiaoyuan thought for a while, and recounted the conversation between his son and him just now. He was about to say that their family is not short of money, so there is no need to divide it so clearly, but the queen said with a gratified smile, I didn't expect the emperor to be able to think like this at such a young age. It's really great. I was afraid that we would spoil him too much. In the future, he will not know the hardships of the people and blindly squander extravagance. Now it seems that the concubine is thinking too much. Chi Xiaoyuan shook his head, frowned and thought. When the queen saw it, she handed Mu Yangling's letter to him, and said with a smile, Aling also took great pains for that kid, Xiao Xiang. He specially lured him to play with the kids in the farm, and asked him to donate money to build a school. Look at those people like this. Let's not say that my uncle only loves and spoils the child blindly, and privately made up stories about our little bear turning into a dandy. Li Jinghua knew that Chi Xiaoyuan didn't know how to teach children. Qi Heiran and Fan Zijin were half pampered and half raised in the army. Coming up, the heavenly King Laozi couldn't stop him. He lacked the composure to take care of the overall situation, and Fan Zijin, needless to say, was a treacherous person with a gentle and elegant skin. But if you want to say that they are crooked, it's not necessarily true. Qi Heiran doesn't say it, but they have great feelings for the country and the people. Although Fan Zijin doesn't care about the country and the people, but in his heart, he is full of Chi Xiaoyuan and Qi Heiran. He listened to what the two of them said, and with this bottom line, he couldn't go anywhere. Qi Xiaoyuan raised them, and he never allowed outsiders to bully his 2 younger brothers. Afterwards, he used a whip to force them to go back on the wrong path. Qi Heiran and Fan Zijin grew up in an abnormal environment, and Qi Xiaoyuan had extraordinary trust and love. Only with feelings can you not be rebellious and turn against others. If you put it in an ordinary person's house, the child will either be spoiled by him, or will be drawn away by him. Just look at Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang. Qi Heiran is enough to spoil children, and Qi Xiaoyuan is even better than him. He spoils children even more. Li Jinghua loves Xiaobao, but compared to Qi Xiaoyuan, she can be regarded as a strict mother, and she is also worried that Qi Xiaoyuan spoils Xiaobao too much. Taking this opportunity, she should have a good talk with him about her son's education problem. The couple coincided with each other, and Qi Xiaoyuan rested in the cunning palace at night. After washing, the couple lay down together and had an in-depth discussion on their son's education. Qi Xiaoyuan went to court the next day with dark circles under his eyes, and the maids and servants who saw this situation unanimously lost their minds. There was even an old nanny who looked at the queen hesitantly, and finally saw that she didn't seem to be in any discomfort, so she could only swallow the words that came to her lips. Unaware that the misunderstood emperor was taking Mu Yangling's letters to study, and finally his eyes darkened, and he took out the family letter he had put away last night, and an uncontrollable crazy thought occurred to him, maybe can they do the things they dreamed of?